going to jump back in. So I was listening to something earlier today. They were referencing this verse. And so we will go to John chapter 14:6. We could all quote it, but I think sometimes it's good even on the verses that we can quote to take ourselves there. And so if you want to go to John 14, chapter number 6, we want to read this together, and then we'll jump back into where we've been in these recent days. And so see if we can get this up and running as well. So there you go. John 14:6 tells us, Jesus speaking, Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. So I've asked this question now every week. Is it possible for us to coexist? And we want to be able to answer that question because there are lots and lots of people out there that you could talk to that would really resist the idea that you could make any kind of exclusive claim with regards to the position that you take being more right than the position that they take. And we want to be able to answer that when somebody says something to us. And before I move on, I'll remind you that we have started to put up, if it'll change for us, we've started to put up our lessons on Apple's podcasts. And you can find them on Spotify and also on YouTube if you search for this slide that's not coming up, Pursuit Ministries. And if you miss something, you want to go back and listen to something again, or if by chance I actually say something helpful, you want to re-listen to it because it was beneficial to you, or you want to share it with someone, then you can do that as well. But that's what you'll look for when you're looking on those places. You can find it, you can follow it, and we would certainly be honored if it's a help to you. And but I know that sometimes it is, and if you're anything like me, sometimes you go through cycles that was not supposed to get clicked on. But so now we're going to jump back into this because we want to be able to answer this this concept of pluralism, which pluralism is basically the belief that it doesn't really matter what you believe, as long as you believe something, everything is just as good as anything else. There are many ways to get to heaven, and all roads lead to God. These are all things that people will say, and yet we want to be able to answer, okay, why is that not actually a viable way to approach the world? And so we started a few weeks ago. We talked about these classifications for faith and different faith systems. And we're not going to review all of this stuff, but I did want to just go over it just real briefly again. So we are just flash it up here as we go through to define the different concepts that go into the belief systems that people have. So again, atheism believes God doesn't exist. Agnosticism, believing that the existence of God can't be known. And most atheists, practically speaking, would fall, if you really push them, would be honest enough to admit that probably outside of their knowledge, because they don't know everything, that God could exist. And so most atheists would technically fall under the category of agnostic, even though they don't necessarily always recognize that. But deism is the belief that God exists, but God is not a personal God. God cannot be known. So the classic idea behind that would be God set the universe spinning, like you set a top spinning, but then he just took his hands off and it just goes without his intervention. And so in a deistic worldview, there would be no miracles because God doesn't intervene in the world. So deism would be in that category. Pantheism believes that all things are God. That's what the word pan means, all. So all things are God. Polytheism, there's many gods, and we mentioned one of the most obvious examples of a polytheistic faith in history that we think of a lot of times would be the Greeks' belief system with all of the pantheon of gods. But then also we talked about Hinduism pretty much at length a few weeks ago, and Hinduism is also a polytheistic worldview as well. Humanism, man is his own God. Monotheism, there's a belief in one God. And so then we dove from there into these different major world religions, and we tried to answer some questions about them. We maybe caused some questions about them, and if that's the case, hopefully you've been challenged enough to try to find some answers yourself. I know that I'm not going to be able to provide all of the answers for you every time we get together. I don't have all the answers. That's why I won't be able to provide all of them, but I'll certainly do my best. But we've talked about Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Judaism, and the one that remains is Christianity. And we're not going to delve into the depths of all of that tonight because that's what we're pretty much talking about all the time. But I do want to make some points tonight about the exclusivity of Christianity and how that really, in the end, eliminates the possibility of there being a concept of coexisting, because the reality is, if we looked at any one of these 5 things that I've got listed right here, every one of them, even though Hinduism is one that absorbs a lot of different belief systems into it, like we said, a Hindu person a lot of times will be willing to accept Jesus Christ into their life because they accept just about every other god into their life as well. They're just they're like, oh yeah, well, but the idea of sharing the gospel with somebody that is a Hindu is that you have to get them to the point of acknowledging that Jesus is the only God, and they have to accept him as the only God in their life. And that's a big obstacle for them to overcome. And so with the exception maybe of Hinduism, the concepts of all of these major world religions, if you try to take all of them and do the thing that's pictured in this picture, and you see it on bumper stickers, it can't work. Because every one of them is fairly exclusive in their claims. But Christianity takes the cake in the exclusivity of its approach to faith. And I said I was listening to something earlier today that they referenced this verse in John chapter 14, John 14, verse 6. And it was a panel of people discussing the verse, discussing aspects of the Gospels, and there was probably 5 people on the panel that are unbelievers, or they're barely believers, and they're not even really sure what that means yet. I mean, and then there's some people that are theologians, and some people that are just scholars that might also not be saved. I mean, they were just all over the board, and they were talking about this verse. One of them's a practicing Jew, and he asked the question about this verse, no man cometh unto the Father but by me. And he asked the question just flat out. He said, so then can I not come to the Father? And no one on the panel answered the question well, just in case you were wondering. No one just came right to it and said the thing that needed to be said for everybody on the panel to hear, unfortunately, but I didn't expect them to either. But some of them you could tell wanted to, but they were being maybe a little bit trying to be polite and not start a fight, I think is what they were trying to do because they were on camera. But the concepts of all of these faith systems really do lead you to a point of you have to make a decision. But I want to talk to you tonight about, one, some actual problems with the concept of coexisting, and then we're going to lay a little bit of the foundation, though we won't get far into it, though I guess I don't plan to get very deep into it, because over the coming weeks we're going to flesh it out a little bit more about Christianity and some of the claims that it makes, so that you can actually know, okay, then if not everything works, why does Christianity, why should Christianity be the one that I turn to? Why should I be a Christian? How come it is superior? Because I want the truth. I'm sure you do. That's why you're here week in and week out. So how do we know that this is the truth? That's what we want to arrive at. And since we dove into this topic, there'll be a lot of other topics that might not be quite so in line with some other things that we are constantly talking about. Like I said, we'll talk about abortion. We'll talk about some different things as well. But I just felt like that'd be the direction to go next with this one. So I just want you to think about these couple things a little bit more clearly about problems with the concept of coexisting. I'm just putting them all up there, and we'll cover them kind of in this order, but I might jump around a little bit. But these are the 5 things I want you to notice. The first one is the idea, the difficulty associated with the concept of coexisting is, first of all, it de-emphasizes truth itself. In ways that it does that, it ignores incompatibilities. The reality is, if you're going to say that Christianity and Judaism and Hinduism, they can all be true at the same time, as much as is true for you, and that's just okay. The only way you can really make that statement is just flat out ignore the fact that they are incompatible with one another. Jesus said he's the only way to the Father. He is the only way to the Father, not the way that he lived. That was kind of the answer that most of the people on that panel gave, was like, well, I think it's more of living the way that Jesus lived. And if you live like that, then you're really identifying with Jesus himself. And that's the way to the Father. No, it's not. Like, living righteously does not get you to heaven. It might make your life better. It might make you more pleasant to be around. It might do a lot of good things for you. But living a life that is modeled after the manners of Jesus Christ, that's not the way to the Father. He is the way to the Father. And so you can't ignore the incompatibilities. You can't, because you don't want to be confrontational. The idea of coexisting, though, would demand that you do. And that's ultimately going to lead to what I would say is just an obscuring of the lines of what truth actually is. And I've mentioned this in past weeks, but there is ultimately what happens when when people get into this idea is they'll try to create a division between types of truth. And so the way that I've always just heard it put is there's a separation between fact-oriented truth and then value-oriented truth. And like I said, I've mentioned this before. Fact-oriented truth would be things that are verifiable by empirical means. Like, you can test it with the scientific method or something like that. Like, it's something that, like, that this is this way because it's an observable phenomenon. It can be tested, it can be duplicated, and that would be something that would be a fact-oriented truth. And this mindset. But then there's a separation to say, okay, but then value-oriented truths are not things that are observable, and so they're held to a lower. They're not held as in the esteem of some people to say, well, yeah, but that's definitely true. It's like, yeah, it's kind of like fact truth up here, value truth down here, and it's just kind of like, yeah, but that's a value-oriented truth, and so it's not really something we can say it's just true across the board. But the problem with that is there are things that we can know that are not, that we know are true, that are not verifiable empirically speaking. Like moral truths, we can actually know if something is true or not true, morally speaking. Logical truths or mathematical truths are not actually truths that are founded in empirical evidence. Like they are kind of like reality-oriented truths. They are just true. Like 2 + 2 is 4 is just something that is true. You don't arrive at that. You can't test whether or not 2 + 2 is not 4. It just is. The law we talked about a few weeks ago or a month or so ago, the law of non-contradiction. Like those are things that they are just true. Historical things cannot be tested empirically speaking. Historical events, like Armistice Day. It happened. But you can't test whether or not it happened. But it's a fact. And so there are truths. The important thing to realize is there are truths that are knowable, that are not just based in the scientific world. And so when we look at the idea of coexisting, that when a separation begins to be brought up to allow people to say, yeah, that's true for you, but not necessarily true for me, because that's a religious truth, and I only believe in science. Well, that means you don't believe in history, you don't believe in moral laws, you don't believe in math, which I don't really believe in math, but no, you don't believe in math, you don't believe in logic. That would be now, no one that says, I just believe in science, actually follows that out in their life. That is, once again, one of those kind of dismissive comments because they don't want to continue the conversation most of the time. But you can point out that there are things that you can know that are not science-oriented. And that's an important thing for us to realize, that coexisting would erode the foundation of truth in every area, because you have to blur the lines so that you can put incompatible things next to each other and say, oh yeah, that's okay. So it makes you de-emphasize truth. And one of the ways that it does that is it elevates emotion over fact. Because it really kind of goes along with that next one that you see on there, it causes you to compromise for the sake of someone's emotions. It is more important to not offend someone than it is to stand up for the truth in a coexist-oriented world. Because you don't want to walk on all over someone. You don't want to make them upset. And it's better that everybody just kind of goes along to get along. And so you're going to bring down the level of what's true so that they're not offended. But the problem with that is you can comfort them all the way to hell. And then that's not good. I remember when we were on our honeymoon, we went to Sights and Sounds, and we watched the Joseph we watched play thing that they put on. And I think it was in that, unless it was something else I watched, and I've always associated with that, the lady that marries Joseph in the play, she makes this statement: if truth offends me, I am in most need of it. Well, that was a great statement. Most people in the coexist world, that's not how they approach life. It's like, I'm not going to say anything. And they'll even do that to you. Sometimes people try to dismiss the confrontational moment because they don't want to offend you. It's not even always that they're avoiding it because they're afraid that you're going to rock their world with the arguments that they have. They're so polite, they won't disagree. And everything's okay. And everything's acceptable. And yes, you can be a boy if you're a girl. Yes, you can be a girl if you're a boy. And so it goes beyond just religion. As the reason I brought that in. It's just, it goes beyond that, because when you erode truth, then any of those things become acceptable. And so this is one of the problems with coexisting, but it doesn't just elevate emotion over fact that way. I know this is the one I knew I was going to do out of order. This bottom one, it assumes fervency determines truth. People oftentimes will bring an argument up like this. There are a lot of people in the world that believe things just as strongly as Christians do. So why is Christianity right? Or sometimes they even believe what they believe more fervently than Christians do. There are some people that are so faithful to their religion that they will crawl miles on their knees on a pilgrimage. You know what I'm not ever going to do in my life? Crawl miles on my knees. Ever. Unless God asks me to. But I have a greatly strong suspicion that He's never going to ask me to. If He does, I'll do it, right? But they do it. And they do it gladly. And they're, in a sense, they do it gladly. They do it because they feel like they have to. They're fervent. Many times they put our faithfulness to God to shame. So what right do I have to say that somebody that's that strong in their belief is not right? I mean, why else would they be that strong in their belief if it's not actually true? How could you be motivated to do something that fervently that's not true? And now that is a very unsatisfying argument, but when someone makes it in the moment, it can be a very challenging thing to overcome, because they're either declaring their own fervency, or they're referring to someone that they know, and it's very difficult to overcome that. But the reality is, just because someone believes something strongly doesn't make it true. Ask any history teacher who's ever graded their class's tests, and people got answers wrong, and they were convinced that was the right answer. I know I knew it was right when I put it on. Like I circled A because I knew it was Thomas Jefferson or whatever, right? Just because somebody believes that Thomas Jefferson's the fourth president, he wasn't. But if they believed it hard enough, wouldn't he be? No, right? Obviously not. Fervency does not determine truth. But in a coexist world, the idea is if it works for you, that's really all that matters. If it motivates you, if it helps you live a moral life, if it resonates with the way that with your personality or the way that you think, then that's really what matters. If it provides the strength that you need through hard times, that's what's important. But if it's not true, sure, great. I'm glad that there was a support structure to help somebody through a hard time. I'm never going to undermine the fact that there are lots of worldviews out there that actually uplift moral society, that help and encourage people during difficult seasons in their life. Like you don't have to be like super negative towards all of that stuff. And all that and cynical about all of it. But the reality is that even if that is all true, that those things were outgrowths of their false religion that they had, and it helped them through difficult times, it still doesn't make it any more true. Matter of fact, it actually makes it a little bit more tragic, because that person is going to be a little less likely to let go of their preconceived notion supported by a religion that they would attribute to being the thing that helped them through. And so it can be harder to get that person out of that worldview. And so that is just, those are things though that come out of this idea that coexisting causes these problems, and it is inherently hypocritical. Because you only are okay with the concept as long as everyone else is okay with the concept. Right? Because Rome was a pluralistic society. When Rome would conquer new territories, all they required is that the territory that they conquered would bow the knee to Rome. Ultimately, once they had emperors, to the emperor, and obviously there was emperor worship in Rome. But it wasn't that the emperor was the only one that they could worship. They just had to worship the emperor in addition to all their other gods. So the problem that came up in the Roman culture with Christianity rising up was that Jesus said, "I'm the way. There's only one God." And Rome was an extremely tolerant empire, not militarily speaking, but religiously speaking, until you came to claims like Christianity. And then we obviously know many, many, many of the stories of what the Romans did to persecute Christians because Christianity claimed exclusivity. And so the idea that pluralism can work and Christianity especially be part of it falls apart, and has fallen apart every single time it's ever been tried. So it's inherently hypocritical, because when push comes to shove, if you say, "Well, this is what I believe," and we've all made those jokes, we've heard the jokes that people that are tolerant up to the point that then you say, "Well, this is what I believe," and they won't tolerate that because it steps on what they believe. And so that idea is inherent in coexisting, but it falls apart very, very quickly. And so those are some difficulties I would say are inherent with the concept. But before we move on, is there anything anybody wants to add to that, or questions you have for clarification on any of those things? All right, very good. Well, the last thing I want to do real quick, and I've already mentioned most of these at some point or another, so I just want to hit them. We'll be done. It's about 10 minutes till the end, and so if you have an unrelated question, you want to ask it. We've not really taken a lot of unrelated questions lately, and that's fine. But if you have them, you're welcome to ask them. You're always welcome to shoot them towards me at any other point during the week. Don't feel like you have to wait till Wednesday night to ask your question. You can shoot me a text, and we can go on from, or we could work it in, or I could just answer it another time. But the last thing I want to talk to you about real quick is some the difference of Christianity as opposed to all these other ones. So the first thing I want you to think about is this: that when Christianity is considered, one thing that you have to have is you have to have Jesus. If you removed the founder of every other world religion, if we know the founder, obviously Buddha for Buddhism, and we obviously know the founder of, and not maybe obvious, but we don't know the founder of Hinduism, but Muhammad, any of these guys, if you remove their founder, you still have their religion. You don't need Muhammad to have Islam, the philosophies that are there. But you have to have Jesus to have Christianity. Historically speaking, if Jesus never lived, then we have no real reason for being here. And that's the difference between, that gets to a difference between the way that some people approach Christianity. Because here at Buffalo Ridge, we do not believe that culturally Christian is enough. We don't believe that that being a moral person is the goal. Our goal is so that people would know Jesus personally. That they would come to have a personal encounter with Jesus Christ so that they can be saved. So, yes, culturally speaking, Christianity has had a major impact on people's lives in the West, in our country, and in other countries that have been highly influenced by Christianity. So much so that the educational world, the political world, the scientific world, all of those areas of life have been dramatically impacted and improved by a Christian worldview. But not everybody that's benefited from those things obviously not everybody has been a Christian, but they've benefited. They've benefited from the economic status that a free country has, in this country, has allowed for. But that's not enough. And while the precepts of Christianity can create an environment where those things can grow, if that's all we produced, a better world, we believe we have failed. I believe we have failed. So, yeah, you could remove Christ from Christianity and keep all of its moral precepts and so to speak, and make a more moral world and more highly functioning society if Christianity, if religion was man-made and it was just man's attempts to better themselves and have something to cling to and have in this life that would make them better and make the societal functions work smoother, because certainly when there's religion and cohesive religion amongst a group of people, they work better together. And yeah, you can remove Christ and you could try to come up with those types of concepts. You can do that. Well, yeah, that's what every other religion is, an attempt to do that. And some of them have been moderately successful in that regard. Buddhism, most Buddhists that I've ever met are pretty nice people, right? Not all of them, but some of them are. Right? So there is that aspect of religion that is what some people do with religion. But true biblical Christianity rejects that notion as enough. But for true biblical Christianity to have its force, you have to have Jesus. And that is why, and we'll talk about this in coming weeks, that is why there is an effort by some to eradicate the knowledge of Jesus historically speaking, questioning whether or not Jesus ever existed, and we talked about it during the Easter season, so we're not going to revisit it except just to reference it, whether the resurrection actually happened. The events that are associated with Jesus Christ have to happen as the Bible said for our faith system to be the absolute truth that we claim that it is. So Christianity is unique because we say without Jesus, without the things he did, especially his death, burial, and resurrection, our faith is vain. While I agree with the guy, if you've ever heard, I think I've mentioned it before, but Pascal was this philosopher, and he's famous for what's called Pascal's wager. And basically Pascal's wager was that if you live as a wicked person, but you enjoy, you enjoy all the pleasures of this life, and you live that way, and you do all the things that are inherent with that, and you get to the end of your life, and God was not true, well, then you had a good life. Like let's just say that by doing all those wicked things, you didn't get all the bad things that could certainly be associated with it. You had all the money, you had all the pleasure, you had all the power, and all that kind of stuff. And you get to the end of your life, you live that way, and God wasn't real, then, well, good for you. Like that's not too bad. But if you live that way and God is real, you have lost everything. But if I, as a Christian, live a moral life, righteously interacting with the people around me, and things go smoothly, as typically is the case when you live a moral life in a functioning society, and I get to the end of my life and God is not real, I've not lost that much, because I'm telling you what, my life, this is speaking personally right now, my life is awesome. Like, I've got an amazing wife, and I've got awesome kids, and look at this little guy right here. Didn't even know we're talking about him. And he's awesome. I mean, he just runs around our house, and he's so funny. And so are the other guys. I mean, they are great. My life is awesome. If I die and this is all I had, fine by me. I've lost nothing. But if I die and this isn't all there is, well, I've gained everything. That's Pascal's wager, ultimately. It was an extended way of looking at it. So if you live wickedly and God is false, well, great. But if he's not false, then not so great. For a Christian, if I live as a Christian and God's not real, well, I miss out on much. Miss out on a lot of heartache, right? A lot of bad things and all the stuff that could come with that. But if God's real, then I've gained everything. So I agree with that, conceptually speaking. But what Paul said is that if Christ be not risen, we are of all men most miserable, right? So conceptually speaking, that's a good way to get someone thinking. But Paul actually said that if Jesus is not true, ultimately speaking, because if all the other things about him are true and the resurrection's got to be true, if the resurrection's not true, all the other things are false, basically. And so it's just pointless, vain. My religion is vain, right? So we have to have Jesus. He is absolutely necessary. Christianity makes exclusive claims. Now, many of these other religions make pseudo-exclusive claims about the way that they view things to a certain extent, but they hedge most of their bets. You do not. There is no hedging of any bet in John 14:6. It is just the fact. It is either true or it is not true. Acts 4:12 declares, there is no other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved. John 3:36, he that believeth on the Son hath everlasting life. He that believeth not on the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God abideth on him. Christianity, the Bible, is full of claims that it can either be one way or the other. There's no middle ground. And it is certainly unique in its position, Christianity is, that in that regard. Then also, it's supported by verifiable truths. Externally speaking, there is historical evidence that supports the existence, like we've talked about before, of God, the historically of Christ, the veracity, the truthfulness of the Word of God, that we know that this is what was written for us to have and to hold. We know these things. And we can go back and we can trace those things out. There are verifiable truths, the resurrection and other things. Internally, there are things that are so outside of Christianity. Then internally, within the Word of God, there are things that we can study and we can dig into and we can delve into and we can know. In a few weeks, we're going to have a Wednesday night choir practice for the choir to get ready for the Christmas program. So I won't be in here, and neither will the choir. So we might be down to a small little group of people. But so if you want to join the choir that week, go over there. But Troy Smith is going to come in here, and he's going to give an intro to if you know who Troy Smith is, he's 6'7" or something like that. He's really big. And so if that helps you know who he is, but he is I don't know exactly, he's a geologist of some sort and has done a lot of study on creation science and has some really interesting stuff that he's been doing some of it in the Victory Bible class on Sundays. But he's going to come in here. He's going to give us a little bit of an introduction that week, and I'll have him come in probably for a few weeks in a row just to give him some time during the new year to share some of that stuff with us. There's a lot of stuff that we can look at to know that what we believe is true. There's another thing that I want you to think about, and it's that last one right there. Christianity is attested to by the Holy Spirit. So what do you mean? I know that I'm saved. I know it. And no one is ever going to take that away from me. You say, is that a legitimate proof? Yeah, it is. Never let someone tell you that the personal aspect of a relationship with Jesus Christ is not viable evidence for on your journey of faith. I know Jesus. I don't know about him. I know about him. I don't just know about him. I know him. Inside my heart, I know Jesus is true. Do you know why I know that? Because the Holy Spirit is there whispering that to me all the time. As an unbeliever can't understand that. They really can't. So that's not what you can say necessarily. You can say that to somebody that's not a believer, but they're not going to be able to process it until they have responded to the work of the Spirit in their heart. And then they'll know too, if they respond in faith, that the Holy Spirit is literally inside of me. And that's what Romans chapter 8 says, that his Spirit bears witness with my spirit that I am a son of God. And that is a truth that Christians can hold to and is a legitimate consideration, despite the fact that someone might try to tell you, well, that's just emotion. It's not just emotion. Okay, because I've had a lot of emotions throughout my life that have been contrary to that reality. But that reality has helped guide me through the ups and downs of my emotions. And so there are some things that make Christianity different. And that last one, I wanted to slip in there at the end. So are there any questions or thoughts on our topic for tonight before we wrap up for the evening? Or thoughts, notations, comments?
Were there other religions besides the four major ones?
Oh yeah, there's plenty of. You could divide that up into endless amounts of little subsets, but yeah, those are the biggest ones. Is really all we delved into with those. Anything else? All right, very good. Well, thank you for being here tonight. We will wrap up with that. If you want a pumpkin roll or a bite of it, then get some. But we thank you for being here this evening. Well.